Thanks for joining us, Lou.
No problem.
We're here at the Macari Centre, obviously named after yourself. We'll come back to that later on when we talk about what you're up to now. But let's go back in time and start with your career
Long
as
time
a
ago.
fledgling. Yeah, a long time ago in Scotland. What first got you into football?
I think it's fair to say when I was growing up in Scotland, all kids were football crazy. Everybody played football. Every single kid. There was very few played anything else. Certainly in Scotland, there was nobody played cricket. Very few played rugby. And everybody used to play, out at night on the streets with a dream one day of playing professional football for whichever club you supported. I was a Celtic supporter, Celtic mad. And eventually used to travel on the supporters coach to watch Celtic week in, week out. Weren't very good at the time, believe it or not. I didn't see them for years. I didn't see them winning anything until a manager came along called Jock Stein, who started winning, and not only did he win things in Scotland, first British manager to win the European Cup, Champions League as it is now. And he did it with very little money. I think in total he spent £30,000 to build a team that went on and defeated the best team in Europe at the time, Inter Milan, in the final. So he was, to me anyway, he was a magician. He, all of a sudden, from travelling on that supporters bus and seeing them win nothing, and watching them win Scottish FA Cups, the league in Scotland, and various other competitions. And it all just seemed to change overnight, but it changed because of the manager.
Fantastic. So what was your actual time like when you got taken on by Celtic? What was, to be a Celtic fan, what was that like to be asked to come and train and then eventually come through the ranks and actually play for the team?
You've just mentioned how it started. I was invited, there was no academies at the time. I was invited to go to Celtic Park 2 nights a week. It was for a 2-year period, and they made it perfectly clear to my parents that after 2 years they would let them know if I was going to be taken on as an apprentice on the ground staff, doing what ground staff lads used to do, which was cleaning the boots, looking after the players' kit, cleaning Celtic Park on a Monday after a game on a Saturday, make sure that the stadium was spick and span by Monday night, and do all that sort of hard work that there was no talk about football at the time, because that's what you were told. That'll be your job, to look after the first team players and look after the ground and look after all the kit. So 2-year periods, as you know, it's a long time. But for 2 years, Tuesday and Thursday night, I used to leave school where I was, which was about an hour from Glasgow, jump on the train, get to the station in Glasgow, and then get 2 buses out to Celtic Park. You daren't be late, you couldn't be late. The manager would be waiting at the front door of Celtic Park to give you a rollicking. So very few of us were ever late. We learned early to make sure we were on time. 2 years later, I went into the office that night, and it probably started off the worst night of my life, because I was thinking, this is it. It's make or break, and I was very nervous. Went in and they said to me that they thought I'd done well in the 2-year period, where I'd gone up and trained those 2 nights a week. And training at the time was simply running around the track, up the terraces, building you up to become a professional footballer. If you did well on any given night, you were allowed to play a little 5-a-side game behind the goals at Celtic Park. That was your reward. But as I say, I walked into the manager's office and they said, we'd like you to start off as an apprentice on the ground staff and hopefully one day play for Celtic Football Club. So you were left in no doubt that you still had a long way to go. They thought something of you, but your first job was going to be to be looking after the first team and the reserve team, and then you would train in the afternoon with the coach that was there. So I started, and it was looking after, thankfully it was looking after the Lisbon Lions, who won the European Cup. All great characters. When I look back now, I can think of how helpful they all were. Made you feel comfortable, made you feel welcomed. And you didn't have to do that much work for them because they had enough pride in themselves to look after their own boots at times and get on with it and prepare for themselves for a game on a Saturday. So I started with Kenny Dalglish and David Hay, who's another Scottish international, Danny McGrain, a lot of youngsters in there at the time whose aim was the same as mine, to become a player for Celtic Football Club. Can't remember exactly how I got my breakthrough into the team, but I was told one night I'd be playing in the reserves. I had enough time to ring my parents and say, I'm playing tonight at Celtic Park in the reserve team, get yourself up here and hopefully I do okay. Got my first game under my belt, which was a relief, and then tried to build myself up physically because the size of me and the frame I had certainly wasn't the frame of a professional footballer. So with the manager's help and the 3 coaching staff that he had at the time, because every club only had about 3 people who worked there, and they explained to me what I had to do to become what they thought was a professional footballer. Physically I had to build myself up, and I did do, but none of it would have happened without the help of the manager, who was a genius. No tactics, no formations, no systems. It was about you. It was about you playing to your strength. And, you know, being in amongst the senior players, I'd witnessed them turn into people ripping their head off at times because they weren't doing what he knew you were good at, and left them in no doubt. You know, these were grown men that he was standing up to and telling them in no doubt where they were going wrong, even after they won the European Cup. I want you to do this because that's what you're capable of doing. I want you to do that, and don't you ever try to do that again because you're no good at it. And they had a knack of getting those messages across to all players, whether it be young or old, about what was required. So I went through the reserve team and played there for a while. And as he'd done with lots of players, eventually I got a game in the first team. Never knew that was happening either. Used to pick the team an hour from kick-off. I was told to go with the team for this particular game, and I thought I was going just to do all the kit, to do all the little bits and pieces that I'd done for a couple of years. And when he announced the team, I was in the blooming team. So I didn't have long enough to even think about, wow, what's happening here. It all just happened. And then my first big game was I was substituting a Scottish Cup final at Hampden Park against Rangers, and I'm sitting in the dugout thinking, I never ever thought I'd be here. I never thought it could happen to me, but I was there. Celtic were winning 1-0 right up to the 85th minute. Rangers equalised, and I remember sitting there thinking, oh, they've just robbed me of a Scottish Cup winners medal. There was 138,000 at the game. Replaying the Wednesday night, we went back to the training camp that we had been at, came back to Hampden on the Wednesday night, and out of the blue he picked me for no reason. I mean, there couldn't have been a reason. I hadn't played a game on the Saturday for them. I hadn't played in such a big game, but he picked me on the Wednesday night, and first major game of any great importance, and there's no bigger game in Scotland than the Scottish Cup final, and especially against Rangers. So again, I didn't have long enough between 6:45 and 7:45 to worry too much about it, and because you're going to be going down that tunnel and you're going to be on the pitch and you're going to be playing against Rangers, and that happened. And what I'd noticed before that with Jock Stein, he'd done that quite often, picked people that no one expected would have been playing, and not only did they play, but that player used to actually do something important in the game. So he had a knack of whoever he made a shock decision about, it would pay off, and that was in the back of my mind. And I was just thinking, I hope his confidence in me is just like it's been with other players, and I'm going to do something tonight, especially in front of and for the replay I think it was 128,000, which showed the importance of the game itself in Scotland, and the importance of playing against Rangers. I scored the opening goal, a little header at the near post, and I thought, oh, this is great. And out there on that pitch with the crowd that was packed into Hampden Park, I felt, I was going to say 10 foot tall, but I never felt 10 foot tall, ever. I felt great. I thought, if we can hang on and win this. We then went 2-0 up with a penalty kick. And I look at the penalty kick again lots of times when I watch modern day football, and the penalty kick was our little outside right called Jimmy Johnson, went through the middle, got brought down, chopped down by a Rangers player. He didn't dive, that was the first thing I always think about. He was chopped down. The Rangers player went over and pulled him up and apologised to him more or less. Jimmy Johnson shook his hand and the Rangers player shook his hand. And all the good things about the way football was at the time was highlighted, it's still highlighted to me in that moment of being awarded a penalty at Hampden Park. We scored, went 2-0 up. Rangers scored near the end, and it just entered my mind for 5 or 10 minutes that I may not be getting a medal. So I was delighted to hear the final whistle. Won the Scottish Cup. I've got my Scottish Cup winners medal. Back into the dressing room. No celebrations with champagne or anything. And the manager told us quickly we're in training the next morning. And training we were, and the next morning we were back into Celtic Park. And the biggest thing of all for anybody of winning a medal and winning the Scottish Cup was just treated as though it was no big deal. And again, that was a tactic of the managers to highlight that, yeah, you've done your job, but you've done the job, and he used to tell us quite frequently that we pay you for, so it's no big deal. Let's get back to work, and back to work we went.
Fantastic story. So you had 6 or 7 great years at Celtic.
Yeah.
But then the move to Man United came around. How did that all work out?
I lost my mother. I lost my father rather. My mother wasn't too well, so I had to support my mother. When I started on £12.50 a week, which was the ground staff wages, when you played in the first team, I was on £50 a week. So again, at the time, that was a massive jump in terms of salary. But when I lost my father, I had to support my mother. I was getting married, child on the way, and with £50, I just didn't have the money required to do all that. And I thought, well, what do you do in these circumstances? And I probably did what very few people ever had the courage to do, which was ask for a move. Go into the manager, walk through that manager's door, which not many people did do, and I didn't want to do it, and sat down with him, and he offered me a new contract, and I was on £50 a week, and he offered me 55. So I got the hump a little bit, and I got a little bit annoyed, not actually in the office, inside me was getting annoyed, and I just knew I couldn't accept that. So I said to him, look boss, I need to move on. I'd played for Scotland, so I knew that the wages in England was something like between £150 and £200 a week. Massive jump at the time if you think about it. And said, look, I can't do what I want to do on that money, support my mum, support my own family. So I just need to go. I had no idea how it worked. I had no idea what the next step was. I had no idea, the most important thing, I had no idea if anybody thought I was any good. That was the most important thing, are you any good? And I had no idea about that. There's no agents around at the time. Manager used to make it obvious that you were never going to get carried away with yourself in terms of scoring a hat-trick, for example. He'd play that down, he'd knock you down at the same time. He'd play it down to the media. So, as I say, I had no idea if anybody south of the border thought that the little lad who at the time played up front for Celtic could come down to here and play up front for somebody down here, because the players in England were always a lot more physical, a lot stronger, a lot taller, a lot heavier, and I had no idea whether I could adjust to that down here, but I was willing to try. Went probably 2 or 3 weeks without getting any indication about anybody wanting me, until the manager rang me one night and said, "Get ready in the morning, you're going to England." So come off the phone, put the phone down. My wife said, "Who was that?" I said, "It's the manager, the boss, and he's told me to get ready. I'm going to England." She said to me, "Where are you going?" And I said, "I don't know." And I didn't know because I daren't ask him. You used to do everything he told you to do, you did it. And he told me to get ready in the morning to go to England. So car pulls up for me at my house next morning. Back of the car's my reserve team manager, Sean Fallon, lovely guy who was a big influence on my career. And I said to Sean, "Where are we going?" And he said, oh, I daren't tell you. If I tell you and the manager finds out, he'll rip my head off. Sean's head off, that's not mine. And so I left my house. My wife didn't know where I was going. I didn't know where I was going. Hadn't been to England that many times either. So when we got near Carlisle and I realised we were then going over the border, next places I recognised on the signs was probably Blackburn, Blackpool and places like that. And when we drove past them, I was delighted because I then knew I wasn't going to Blackpool or Blackburn. But there was lots of other signs of other places. And eventually we turned off for Southport. And I thought, bloody hell, Southport? Where are we heading for here? And I couldn't think of a team in the league called Southport. There was a team in non-league called Southport. But eventually we stopped at I think it was Prince of Wales Hotel, it was called, in the High Street in Southport. And I went up to the girl at reception. I said, "Is there any Football League teams play here?" She says, "Only Southport." She said, "But they're not in the Football League." And I was confused. I had no geography of where Southport was near. But to my relief, I got back in the car and we moved on, and we ended up, I was going through the gates at Anfield, and I knew obviously the manager at Liverpool was Bill Shankly. I knew Bill Shankly was a big friend of Jock Stein. I knew they'd both, been big friends for years. And Liverpool were playing that night. They were playing Burnley in an FA Cup replay. Went into Shankly's office, and I was terrified there as well because I was terrified of Jock Stein, but I'm probably even more terrified of Bill Shankly because he had a reputation of being a bit like Stein, a no-nonsense manager. And I was shaking. And then it all unravelled what I was doing there. You're here to, Jock said that you want to come to England. I want to have you. I've watched you play. I like you. I think you're this, and I think you're that. And there was no big selling point. The fact that's where I was sent to. I had no say in the matter. So there was a game on. Went to watch the game. Went up in the director's box, sat down, and to my left there was an empty seat. It was the only empty seat in the director's box. And just at kick-off, Pat Creran come in, who used to play for Celtic, so he knew me, and was now at Manchester United. Asked me what I was doing there, and I said, "Well, I'm here to sign for Liverpool. I've just come down in a car with Sean Fallon, who Paddy knew." I said, "No, I've ended up here and I'm signing for Liverpool." So he says to me, "Don't sign, we'll sign you at Manchester United." And I thought, wow, Manchester United at the time, and Best Law Charlton. Wasn't bothered how they were doing either in the league or anything like that, but I knew they were struggling. But I still thought Best Law Charlton, if I've got an opportunity, I want to head for Old Trafford. Didn't know anything about what terms they were going to offer me. I knew Liverpool were offering me £180 a week, which was massive compared to 55. You got 5% of the transfer at the time. I didn't dare ask Bill Shankly what the transfer was, although I wanted to, because it was 5% of, eventually it was 200,000 at Manchester United, which got you £10,000, which was a fortune then as a player. You couldn't retire, but it was still a lot of money. But I was there, director's box, watching this game against Burnley, and I thought, oh my God, I've got to go and tell Bill Shankly, who's got a reputation of being a no-nonsense manager, that I'm not going to sign for Liverpool. I'm going to Manchester United. I didn't have the courage to do that, but what I did do is I went and told him I needed time to think about it, which was a lie. I didn't need any time to think about it. I was going to Old Trafford. Went back to the Adelphi Hotel in Liverpool, to spend the night there. I was supposed to go back to Anfield the next morning. I jumped on the train to, Tommy Docherty was a manager at the time, I jumped on the train to Glasgow where he was, and arrived there and signed within 10 minutes of arrival. Bill Shankly by then had been informed by the press that I'd got on the train to Glasgow. And that was it. I was a Manchester United player, as I say, within 10 minutes. I didn't have to haggle about 180 quid a week. I didn't have to haggle about the way it was structured at the time, that you got 5%. There was no haggling, that was it, you got 5%. I did ask Tommy Dock what the transfer fee was, and he said 200,000. And obviously I realised then it was a £10,000 transfer that I benefited from. That was a Thursday, I think. It was a Thursday morning. I'd gone up, spent the day in Glasgow, travelled back on the Friday, made my debut on the Saturday against West Ham. None of this, they need time to settle down and get a feel of your teammates. And having played in front of 138,000 people at Hampden, and having played for Celtic in front of 90 and 100,000, playing at Old Trafford in the first game was no problem to me. It wasn't a case of nerves, there was no nerves. I wanted to do well, so that brings about its own sort of little bit of nerves. But in terms of walking down the tunnel and going on to Old Trafford, going onto the pitch, which a lot of players had failed to do in years before that, they'd struggled, and they'd struggled in years after that when I was there. Certain players that we signed couldn't handle it. It was a big deal, but fortunately for me, with the Celtic background, I went out against West Ham, did okay I think, but got the equaliser towards the end, and then spent 11 years there. And I think if you spend 11 years at any football club, I think it tells you two things: that you enjoyed your time there, and they enjoyed having you, because you don't last 11 years if they haven't enjoyed having you there, and the managers that have been there want to keep you there for that period of time. So I ended up, that was the end of my playing career, and when I look back on it now, I do believe, along with Scotland and playing for your country and playing in a World Cup, I was very lucky and fortunate that I couldn't have had a better playing career, but down to the people that had their hands on me as a youngster. If it hadn't been for them, I know I wouldn't have achieved what I did achieve.
So Bill Shankly always welcomed you with open arms back at Anfield after that then?
Actually, funny enough, he did. And, Bill Shankly had a great sense of humour. And I think it was the day after I'd signed for Manchester United, he was speaking to the press lads, and he said, I only wanted him to play in our reserve team. So I thought that was quite funny, and I enjoyed that as well. Yeah. So when I did go to Anfield for the games, and I did speak to him on a couple of occasions, I did say, I came here, Bill, because I'm in the first team, but I've been here at Liverpool. I'd only have been in your reserve team.
Oh, great story. So, like you said, successful time at Man United again. So when you moved to Swindon, was that as sort of player manager or a sort of coaching role there?
That was a player manager to start with, but I quickly realised that Swindon towards the bottom of the old 4th division, it was at the time. I've lost track nowadays with so many changes to the game, but it was the old 4th division, struggling. Went for the interview. As you can imagine, at the interview, they asked me lots of questions about, you've been at Manchester United for most of your life, Celtic before that, 2 of the biggest clubs in the world. How are you going to handle Swindon? And I had to be honest, and I just said, well, I don't know. No point in me giving you an answer to that. We'll see what happens. How are you going to handle management? I didn't know. And then had an idea if I got the job, what I would do is I'd look back on my managers that I had played under, think what they did, form an opinion what I thought was right and maybe what I thought was wrong. That was easy to do because I thought what most of them had done was right. I'd had 3 managers at Manchester United, Tommy Docherty and Dave Sexton and Ron Atkinson. I had 1 manager at Celtic, which was Jock Stein. So it was quite easy to look back at those managers and say, yeah, I like that, I think that was right. As a matter of fact, I thought what they all did was sort of the right method. They all had different strengths themselves, and I tried to pick out their strengths and what I thought was helped me in my career. And starting with Jock Stein, his strength was no nonsense, no messing around. It's football, pal, or you're out the door. I like that. I still like it to this day, although I don't see it nowadays in football. Tommy Doc, very, very funny in the dressing room before the game, a sense of humour, relaxed you. It wasn't tense, it wasn't about, never mentioned the opposition. Jock Stein never mentioned the opposition either. They never get a mention at all. Again, unlike nowadays when it's supposedly plotting and planning, systems you're going to play, formations you're going to play and all that. Those 2 in particular. Dave Sexton, nice man, great guy, bit serious about his football, probably the most serious of all the managers I had, and I probably felt that led a little bit to Dave's downfall because Manchester United at the time had people like Bestlaw and Charlton had gone. Manchester United has always been a bit of a flamboyant football club where the players go out and do their bit, and probably that wasn't to Dave's like, and so he tried to change things around a little bit, which wasn't going to work at Old Trafford. But a great guy, loved him. And then along came a mixture, I think, of most of them. Ron Atkinson, you know, Ron was supposed to be this guy that lay on a sunbed all day and making sure he was tanned and at the training ground. But no, Ron was a real football enthusiast, like Dave Sexton. He was quite witty, like Tommy Doc, and he was quite serious, like Jock Stein. So he had a mixture of a lot of those things that are required to be a manager at the time. So when I went to Swindon, I thought, I'm going to try and get some of those things into action here at Swindon. Didn't have a clue really how else I was going to approach it. We started off, as I say, in the 4th division. Started off poorly. The season we got promotion into the next league up, we started off, I think, with something like 5 points out of 24, which is, you know, it's not good. But then something, and I don't know what it is to this day, something just clicked. We got on a winning run. The winning run never came to an end. We had the odd draw and the odd defeat here and there, but right to the end of the season, we kept winning, and we ended up with a record number of points in the league at the time, which was 101. And still don't know how we did it. It was just because I decided that I'd try and manage the football club the way I've just explained, and thought, well, it's worked, so we'll continue doing this and see where it takes us. Took us another division up, and it took us almost to the top league at the time, which was League One. Got beaten in the playoffs, and it just didn't happen. The fact that we had done what we had done, obviously I obviously had attracted a bit of attention from other football clubs. Had the chance to move on a few times, didn't want to do it on that road from the bottom division to almost the top. I had other opportunities and thought, no, I've got a good feeling about here, I'm going to stay here until I get a different feeling. And once we got into that league below the top league, I had a feeling maybe we had achieved as much as we're going to achieve. Missed out in the playoffs, and thought if an opportunity does come in, I'm going to take it.